Thanks for having me today. So a bit of background, I'm ex-marketer, so I've kind of live and breathe the marketing automation world for the last 2-3 years. And since then, I'm now running an agency specialized in marketing automation and specifically for B2C. So I'm going to delve pretty deeply into the online retail B2C space for marketing automation, which is something that doesn't get covered a great deal. Mainly because most of the vendors in B2C are primarily from a B2B background. Others claim to be marketing automation but tend to be more email marketing. So hopefully I can cover some things you haven't seen before and stimulate some ideas for those who are in the B2C area on how you can leverage this for yourself, but also some actual real case studies about what this can do for your B2C business. Okay, so firstly, just some general stats. I think most people in this room will probably know that your retail's moving. If you look at the growth rates between online and bricks and mortar, you're talking about a six times growth in online retail versus bricks and mortar. So there's absolutely no question that retail is moving into the online storefront. So in Australia, we're talking about 90% of people have purchased something online, although as a total, it's still around 6 to 9% of the overall retail spend. So it's still pretty small, but it is growing very quickly. And the year-on-year growth of online retail is massive. And we're still very much behind the UK and the US in terms of just the overall growth. So I won't dwell too much on that, but that's the area I'm going to be focusing on. However, most of what I talk about can be applied to B2C in general. I am focusing specifically on e-commerce. Okay, so one of the things with the whole shift from bricks and mortar into the online space is a lot of companies, and I see this every day, they've moved their stores online, but they've forgotten the retail experience. There's a reason there are retail assistants in stores, because that's the people who sell the product. At the end of the day, if you don't have that, you just have a Costco, you have a self-checkout, self-service kind of store. And most brands aren't going for that. They're going for retail experience. That's why they employ sales assistants, retail assistants, and they spend a lot of money on training those people up to create that experience because it sells, it works. Unfortunately, in the shift to online, a lot of companies, and I'm talking mainly about companies that were traditional bricks and mortar and now have moved into online versus those like Iconic that might have started directly online. They've forgotten the sales assistant. They've forgotten that actual retail experience and bringing that into the store. So what's worse than that, however, is when we're talking about e-commerce where they have what I call either no digital sales assistant. So digital sales assistant is what I term replicating the customer experience in bricks and mortar on the online store. Or even worse, they have very poor email marketing, SMS marketing, which is the equivalent of having a disengaged or a very poor retail assistant, a digital retail assistant. So why is that important? Why should you care? Firstly, I just wanted to really explain what it's all about. Like why is it so important to have that retail assistant, that digital retail assistant? And this is a customer experience for, well, I'll just delve straight into it. So this is my brother. He's my case study for FC UK. He's a loyal customer. He's been a customer for 4 years. He only shops online. This is a good example of, I guess, his generation in terms of online behavior. Now, you have to keep in mind that it's 4 years he's been shopping online, and that's all he does with FC UK. So if you actually look at, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Now I'm going to compare his experience. So if he were to go into a store, what would the equivalent experience be online? And that's to give you a bit of context as to why you need marketing automation in the B2C or the e-commerce world. So imagine he were to go into a store. He's only been into a store once, but let's say he goes into a store and he's getting this kind of behavior, like a salesy, very pushy retail assistant. That wouldn't be acceptable in a store. It's something that he wouldn't appreciate. It's something that the manager of the store would not accept from their retail assistants. And yet, if you look at FC UK's email, sorry, is anyone from FC UK here? Just before I delve into this? Good, good. Don't want to get sued. So if you look at his inbox, he gets 2 emails a week, and they're purely about sales. And if you actually look at it, hopefully I'm going to get the right button. Sometimes he gets 2 emails about the same sale. It's like, oh, the sale's coming, and oh, now the sale's on. So this is the equivalent of that retail experience where you'd have a retail assistant in your face just trying to sell. So it's something that stores, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this, online stores just think this is okay, this is all right, this is email marketing that it's normal, but it's not. Because if you take into account what it would look like if it was in store, it would not be acceptable, and it shouldn't be acceptable online. That's just one example. I'm going to go through a few. Now, imagine Jeremy walks into a store and he has this kind of scenario where he gets confused for a woman, where he clearly is not a woman. So he'd probably be offended, right? He'd probably be offended, let alone not come back to the store. And yet, this is the kind of emails he gets from SCUK. And I love this bit. That's the best bit. I love that one. That subject line. Right? He assures me he doesn't buy women's clothes. So it's not like they're very sophisticated tracking his behavior and, oh, actually, hey, you buy women's clothes, buddy, so this is what you should have. No. He is a guy. He only shops for guys' items, and yet he gets emails like this all the time. That's just not acceptable. Like from an email marketing perspective, you're not bringing that retail assistant. This is an example of a very poor digital sales assistant. So this is another one everyone's experienced. If you go into a store, well, the equivalent of in-store is if he were to go back to the same store twice a week for 4 years running every week, then you would expect the people in there to know your name, to know everything about you, to basically be able to say, hey, like these new items have come in and you'll love them, etc. They should know everything about you. And if you went to a store, if you're a repeat visitor in a store, they should be able to recognize you and just treat you like an individual. However, online, whether it's email or whether he hits the actual e-com site, he constantly gets asked, do you want to shop for a woman or do you want to shop for a man? So clearly they don't know anything about him. They're not, and everyone's experienced this. You go to a store, the experience is, unless you're shopping on Amazon, it's the same experience. Whether you're going there for the 100th time or the first time, it's exactly the same. They're just not treating you as an individual. And that's the retail experience. It's about being treated like an individual, or at least being treated like a person, as opposed to just a number, a statistic on the website. Another example is irrelevant offers. So imagine Jeremy's in store, he buys a pair of jeans, and the sales assistant comes up and goes, hey, there's a great pair of heels that goes with those jeans. He goes, well, that's not really anything to do with me. And yet, that's what Jeremy's getting in email as well as on the store. He's constantly getting these offers around women's clothing. And it's not just women's clothing. Like I'm using the male, female because it's very simple, but what about if he only shopped for a certain type of product? He always got bags or shoes. And instead, he's getting all these irrelevant offers around gardening implements. It's about tailoring to the individual. And this is one everyone's experienced, is when you want to buy, you're ready to buy, you have your cash, and there's no one there to take your order. There's no sales assistants, or there's a massive line, and you just go, right, no, I don't want this product enough to wait that long. So you leave. The digital equivalent is this, 20 plus fields that he has to fill in to buy a shirt. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's not worth my time to fill in all of those things. Or worse, if he's a repeat visitor, he's forgotten his password, so he needs to reset it. Because the likelihood he doesn't go back that often. So he has to reset his password, which probably takes longer, because now he has to wait maybe 20 minutes till that email arrives, and he's refreshing, and trying to get that reset link. So these are just the kind of problems that most stores have online that you would never experience in a store. And if you did experience in a store, you would go complain. You would go to the manager and say, this is unacceptable. And actions would be taken. Yet online, it seems to be perfectly acceptable. And the reason for that is that stores have moved from traditional to online without even thinking about how do we take that retail experience? How do we take that digital sales assistant across? So the next question is, well, okay, that's great, but who cares? What actual measurable impact does that have on your business? So that's what I'm going to go into here. The name has been changed to protect pretty sensitive business information, but this is a major retailer online in Australia that do women's shoes. And it's essentially the effect of having no digital sales assistant on their actual bottom line in their online store. And it's some pretty staggering statistics. And they've been around for a while. They've been around quite a while, both in both bricks and mortar and online. So it's some interesting stats. So first thing, when we went in and did some analysis, they were happy with the kind of rates they had in terms of signups. One of the things straight away I realized was, why is their online 7 times less than their in-store, considering they had very high volumes of traffic to their website? That was already like a massive red flag right there. But what really got them thinking when I showed this diagram to them was, okay, your retention per month is only 70 or so percent. You've actually got a huge, like 30% rate of people basically saying, we don't want to hear from you again. So their retention is very low. Database growth, they were happy with database growth, but actually, well, you could be doing a lot better because your retention is low. What was more damning is when we did an analysis of their database. They started off with a database of 500,000. When they actually duplicated that, it dropped down to 200K. So already that was staggering. But then when we did an analysis of the activity of the people, a very simple one, nothing more sophisticated than saying who has been active in the last 6 months. So email, online, any kind of online presence, have they been active in the last 6 months? 35K. And then the rest were just completely inactive. Those 100, I told them, I said, look, you can get rid of the 133K in your database. It'll have no measurable impact on your online spending, on your online revenue, which kind of shocked them. And they should be shocked because they have an incredibly disengaged audience. Even though their database, they were quite happy with the growth and the size at the beginning. Now, a lot of you have probably pretty experience with email marketing, so I'm not going to go into, I'm going to explain in too much detail, but they were continually sending they were continually sending emails, blanket emails to everyone in their database. With a highly disengaged database, what that means is you're sending emails to toxic segments. So toxic segments are people that are inactive, and therefore you get penalized by Gmails and Yahoos of the world. They will decrease the deliverability of your emails simply because the engagement rate of your emails is so low that they will send those either to spam or they'll send them to a promotions box in Gmail. So because they were sending blanket emails and not having any understanding of how disengaged their database was, their delivery rates were just bottomed out, were really, really low, because most of the database was toxic segments. So now if we looked into the actual e-commerce store, and what they were interested in is they wanted to reach 1 million subscribers, and they wanted to grow their database to 1 million, and they wanted to reach a certain revenue target, which was, I think they wanted to reach 2 million a year. And the first thing we looked at is, okay, what is preventing them from actually reaching the maximum number of signups and what's preventing people from purchasing online? So we did a bit of an analysis, and you'll see the total web traffic per month was 143K, which is pretty healthy. Of that, there was roughly 33K that were multi-visit versus just single visit bounce off. So I would say, these are relatively engaged people. But if you look at the sign-up rate, it's just tiny. There's a massive sign-up rate drop-off. And when we broke that down a bit more, we're like, why is that so high? We looked at their actual... What's happening here? Okay. So when we broke it down, we looked at their actual process for signing up people, and there were 3 steps. And at each point, there were these drop-off rates. And what really amazed me was their sign-up process was so poor, yet there was still this determined people that would go through 3 screens and sort of decipher whatever there was on the screen to actually sign up. It just amazed me that they had anyone that would go through that process and sign up. So there was a lot of drop-off potential here. And what I'll talk about in the next half of the talk is about using marketing automation to recover some of that drop-off. The next part was the purchase behavior, which is obviously they were very interested in that. Now, if you look at the browsing rates versus the cart rates, it's not too bad. There's not a lot they could have done to really change that number. But if you look at the cart abandonment, it's massive. So their purchases are only like 10%, not even that. So you have a massive cart abandonment rate, which really, they were doing nothing at the time to do anything about that. And then if we break it down a bit further, where were people dropping off? You have a whole host of areas where they're dropping off. So at the checkout, viewing the cart, adding the items to the cart, and then even before, like people that I would class as being engaged but never even put something in the cart. And again, that's another problem that can be tackled quite well with marketing automation. Okay, so now I'm going to get into what you can do and what we did do about those kind of drop-off rates to increase sign-up rate, the engagement of the customers, as well as the purchases, increase the revenue. Okay, so cart abandonment is something everyone's experienced, everyone knows about. The difference with marketing automation is the intelligence behind it. Now, you can do triggered emails. I wouldn't class that as marketing automation. Triggered emails which is most e-com sites that have abandoned cart are just simply triggered emails. When we're talking marketing automation, we're getting a lot more sophisticated. We're crafting a journey. You know, it's not just one email. It could be 1, 2, 3. There could be different calls to action on each 3. The timing, the criteria of sending the second and third are completely controllable because that's the whole point. When you automate the marketing, you're setting the criteria, you're setting that flow. So for example, one I saw in the UK was that they're pretty well advanced in terms of the cart abandonment. Their best practice is to send 3, and then on the third cart abandonment is to have a discount. Now, what they found was the discount in the third email was encouraging people to wait for the third email and get the discount, right? Obviously, like the first time it happens to you, you go, right, okay, well, if I wait, I'll get the discount. And then, of course, that's a pattern they saw. With something like marketing automation, you could say, well, I'm looking to send the third one if they've had that this month. I might only send it if they're a high-value customer. I might only send it if they have a high cart value. You can get very detailed as to what is the flow. You know, what is the flow? What is the logic around it? As well as customizing the actual email to take into account the behavior of the person. So that's the difference between a marketing automation and something as simple as a triggered abandoned cart email. It's two very different things. And you pay two very different prices for the software that does the two things. But if you look at the revenue recovery rates, they're very high. When we implemented this for a customer, the ROI was more than 8,000%. I mean, we're talking massive ROI increases because they have such high volume in the store. Okay, so the next thing, browse abandonment, that's another one you may or may not have experienced. A good one that I've seen is Fiverr. So Fiverr is a place where you get design gigs. So this is an email I get when I go looking for something in the graphic and design section, but I don't actually put anything in my cart. So what it will do, it'll say, hey, look, you're obviously looking for something. Why don't I suggest some things for you? And browse abandonment, they have lower conversion rates, but because you're targeting such a much larger percentage of people coming in, it's actually very effective at driving revenue. So here what you're doing is you're using the behavior of the person online, whether it's in the store or via email, to tailor what you suggest to them. So if I take an example of women's shoes, if I'm interested in heels and I was shopping around in another category, perhaps flats, when I get this browse abandonment email, it will recommend to me what flats are popular among my type of persona, which is someone who likes heels. Because you can do that kind of thing. You can say, right, what kind of flats do people that fall into the heels persona tend to buy? And then I'll suggest those. Because they could be quite different to someone who's only interested in flats. And of course, it's not going to suggest ones that I've already purchased. So that's the kind of thing you can do when you're using marketing automation for browse abandonment. And browse abandonment is definitely one that requires marketing automation because you need some smarts around recommendations. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. Simply triggering an email saying, hey, you were looking at this product and you left, it's really not going to drive anything. It's just a triggered email. Okay, so the other thing is, how do we increase the net growth of engaged people? One of the ones I'm not going to cover is smart sign-up. So you've all seen I don't have an example here in these slides, but you've all seen the modal pop-up boxes to drive sign-ups, right? That's something everyone's seen. And some people are against them, some people are for them. If you look at the stats around driving sign-ups, it works. But a lot of companies are reluctant to use them because they're simply a bit too much in your face. Something with like marketing automation, you're able to tailor that experience. The first pop-up that comes up, when does it pop up? Is it when they reach a certain threshold of engagement? Do I personalize it according to what kind of behavior I've seen on the store? Do I give an incentive? Do I say, hey, why don't you sign up now, and those heels you have in your cart will give you 10% off. It's about giving something, it's crafting an experience, giving people some kind of reward for signing up versus something dumb, which is just like sign up, sign up, sign up. So that's one example to drive sign-up rates. The other thing is, like, why do you need to, and I get asked this all the time, like, why are subscribers so important? Why can't we just focus on customers? Strangely enough, I get asked that by retailers. And it's really simple. A VIP or a customer, if you look at, for example, the case study I was talking about, the average spend on the site was $200. Like, an average cart was $200. Yet the yearly spend is like roughly $150. So basically, most of the people on the site are not going to buy because they've already purchased that year. Like, at any given time, they don't really have value. You still need to nurture them because they're going to buy next year or when they next have money. But where the value lies is subscribers, people that haven't purchased, that may not know the brand that well, but have some kind of interest in it. More importantly, they have a lot of annual spend remaining. So you need to really target, you need to grow that subscriber base and then convert those subscribers to actually purchasing. The other issue I was alluding to before was how disengaged the database was. So this is a bit more of a breakdown of their stats, but if they look at the entire database, for 6 months, 37% of the database had never opened an email, and then 6 months, no one had clicked, 60% had never actually clicked an email. So it's pretty disengaged. How do you, and that was chronic through most of their online marketing, was just a disengaged kind of it was a customer base that was just uninterested in what they were sending. So what's the solution? The solution is content. You know, everyone knows, oh, content's king, content's great, but a lot of online retailers are actually reluctant to put out content. And the ones I talk to, I say, why? Like, I mean, you know that you should be putting out content to engage subscribers and customers. Why don't you do it? And the answer is always, well, we can't measure it. We can't justify spending money on the content. Or they say, oh, we tried it, but it didn't work. You know, well, and when you start digging, like, what do they mean by it didn't work? It usually means they can't justify the spend. They have the MD coming by and go, well, what are we spending all this money on? And they can't justify why they're creating this content. So that's another thing that marketing automation is quite effective for. Because yes, you don't need to necessarily constantly create new content and send that content out on a campaign by campaign basis. One of the best content pieces is your welcome program. It's when people are most engaged, it's when they've just signed up, it's when they're most interested in the content you're about to put out. And a good welcome program nurtures them through that initial cycle. And it's something you put in place, you might change every 6 months, but essentially it's there, it goes out, it will actually move the needle in terms of engagement without continual effort of redeveloping content and sending it back out. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't replace a content strategy, but it does alleviate a time-poor marketing department. So now if we go back to the other problem, which is how do we calculate the ROI on content to be able to justify spending on that? So that's a key part. I think that's a really key part that gets completely neglected in online retail. I mean, look at the FC UK example. It's all about sales. That's it. The only thing they can send you of value is a sale where they're discounting, and that's not how you build a brand. Building a brand is about putting brand content out there, putting content that's valuable. So one of the ways to do that is, one of the key problems if you look at email marketing from a sales perspective. So if we look at over time, each dot is an email going out. So we're sending an email a day. These red dots are sales emails that got opened. If we look at it, a purchase occurs here, and then all most systems, if they do any kind of ROI sort of calculation, will simply say, okay, well, clearly that sales email drove that sales, that sale. But the reality is it's not really the case. Just because they purchased at that point doesn't mean the sales email at that time or just before actually drove that sale. It's much wider. You need to look at the entire customer life cycle. It's not about sending an email and going, how much money did that email make? And that's where retail's at right now in the B2C space. It's simply, we send out this email, it makes us X amount of money. Well, did it really? Isn't it more the customer lifecycle journey, not just the email you sent there? But because they can't measure it and they can't track it, that's all they can really do. So what I say to them is, well, and this is a key part of marketing automation, is the concept of scoring. Engagement scoring, lead scoring, whatever you want to call it. It's somehow measuring this person versus this person, or this subscriber versus that subscriber, who is the most engaged? Who is the most engaged in what we send them? And the way you do it in marketing automation is using scoring. So if you now put this data and you put it against the scoring, you can now start to see, well, actually, there's a bit more context now. I'm now seeing how the engagement score changes over time or goes down over time. And what that enables me to do is say, well, actually, this sales email here drove the score up. So did this one here. So did these two. So really, shouldn't I attribute that sale back to those sales emails more than just the one directly before? Because they did move the needle in terms of engagement score. So when I talk about engagement score, I'm talking about their behavior online on the online store, their email engagement, their engagement on social, anything that you can measure that you can put against some kind of engagement score. And then, of course, the logical conclusion then is if I'm putting out content, which are the yellow dots here, then if that engagement score goes up because of that content, then I'm driving someone towards a purchase. And therefore, I should be able to split that money from that purchase over all the content that I sent out leading up to that purchase. And that's a very key part. That's actually one of the most key parts in terms of when you're talking about content strategy. If you're trying to push that into a retailer, they'll never go for it unless you can track back the actual money. And the marketers will thank you for it because they know they need to do it, but they find it very hard to be able to justify it to management as to why they spend X amount of money on content for their retail customers. And that's it from me today.